Podcast. My name is Casey and I am your host, and I am so excited for tonight's episode. We have Jose from No Way Jose and 1/6 of Tower Gang and Timcast podcast appearance. How are you doing, Jose?
Doing all right, man. Doing all right. I actually probably got more.
I thought I was going to keep going with that riff, but I ran out of.
I actually got probably more of a boost out of the Part of the Problem appearance, surprisingly.
That's right.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, which I guess it makes sense if you think about it, since that's like more my audience. But
yeah, sure.
You know, but I don't know. It's great to be here. You know, looking forward to it. I will warn you, I'm not 100% on my A game. I have like 4 litters of kittens right now, so I'm stretched so thin. I don't know if you've heard, if you followed me enough to know I do breed hairless cats. So we have a lot of litters right now. So I'm having to like get up in the middle of the night, bottle feed them and stuff, because some of the mothers aren't producing as much milk as they're supposed to. So yeah, it's like almost like having a newborn right now.
Wow. Is this you said 4 litters?
Yeah, we have like 4 litters. I mean, they're varying ages. So
is that more than common for you at one time?
Yeah, usually we'll have like 1 or 2.
Oh wow. Yeah. So at least double.
Yeah. So
well, yeah.
I mean,
so
some of them are getting ready to go home, but it's still a lot of upkeep. So
yeah. So before we went live, we were talking about the Captain America shield behind you, and I was admiring your background.
Yeah,
you said, you made it when you're in the military.
Yeah, the shield I made, like there was a period of time where I was an aircraft mechanic in the military for like 11 years in active duty Air Force, and I was a crew chief. So, but there was a period of time, which just means I just kind of do generic maintenance, general maintenance. I always joked and tell people my job was like I was kind of like a master inspector, because I worked back shop, so I wasn't even like doing the day-to-day inspections. So my job was just like, that looks fucked up. I don't know how to fix it, but I know who can. So that was kind of my job. But anyways, for a period of time, I was stuck in a hangar and we were next to a shop on night shift where nothing was going on, and we were next to like our sheet metal shop, or I forget, it was Melstech sheet metal, whatever. Anyway, metal nerds, and they were just like bored on nights, and we were like, hey, I wonder what these machines can do. And we made a Captain America, like the old school Captain America shield. And and then I got like a legit Civil War rifle up there. So whoop, whoop, whoop. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were telling me about that before, too. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, my wife's family just found it on their property like forever ago. So yeah, we've looked it up and stuff. It's legit. I think it was actually a Confederate gun. We've looked into the details of it. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't fire. Obviously, it's old as hell, but you know, it doesn't even have the fire, the firing. God, what's the word I'm looking for? The assembly or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, but that's I got a lot of shit behind me that I've accumulated over many years.
That's awesome.
Some stuff I probably wouldn't have gotten now, but oh no, either way, it's fun. It's nice. It's nice to have a little colorful black background behind me. I don't know. So,
so like before we get to the main event, I wanted to ask you a little bit, because I haven't asked any of the guys about Tower Gang. How did you all find each other? And did you have the group chat before the podcast? I think that's how it happened. And so how did you find each other and kind of start that up?
And they still exist, so people still do them on Twitter, but they're not the same. There was a period of time where it was like this insane algo hack, like because and what you would do is probably, here's a good example. Meghan McCain, I believe at one point, I don't think I was part of this tower. I don't think we were actually part of this tower. This is before us, but they towered her. I can't remember what her post was, but they put below her post, it said, Daddy's in hell, piggy, or something like that. But I can't remember the exact verbiage. But what you did is we had these group chats, and we would kind of like scheme and be like, hey, what should we say? Like, and we would kind of all agree, come up with the most clever thing to say, and then we would then drop letter by letter in like a reply. And if you understand how Twitter works, it's like reply, and you reply to that reply to that reply, and you can kind of make a chain. Or a thread, if you will, is what they usually call them. But so you would start with, and you would boom, 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 dart a letter, and then now you have like a whole essentially thread coming down. So it was an algo hack in the sense, because now I can understand why it'd be an algo hack, because if you think about it, it makes sense that you'd be like, oh yeah, we're going to want to boost things that are having a lot of people interacting, a lot of different people interacting with it, because part of the rules that there was like these unsaid rules of like towers, and sometimes said rules where it'd be like, don't, like, you can't repeat. Like, so if you said poop, like you would put a P, I'd put O, and then we don't do it again. Like someone else has to put an O, someone else has to put the P. That way it's like different people. It's just, it was crazy algo hack. So it was this way that these people that have like 300 followers can like actually get Meghan McCain to be like, what the fuck? I appreciate what you did. It's
Quality
funny.
trolling.
Yeah, there was a period of time where it was like, it was just blowing people's minds, and like you would get like crazy likes, retweets, all like responses. It would be a way to like get through that filter to where like, however Twitter does it, like if I go fuck you to some journo right now, even me having like over 4,000 followers, there's a good chance they may not even see it. It's a lot, because I know me, I there's a lot of times, especially if I don't follow you, and if you don't have a lot of followers, for some reason it doesn't even hit my notifications.
Yeah.
Like I have no control over that. It's just the way that it is. So it's almost like you have to break through that wall, and that was like a way to do it. So it was funny. There were journalists that were like whining and crying. There were people that were like locking their accounts. It was great. There was a period of time where it was popping off, but after a while, I think they did something. The algos were like, now it doesn't have the same effect. It's still fun, I mean, but it doesn't have the same effect like it used to. But there was a period of time, especially peak COVID, where everyone got on Twitter, everyone was angsty, everyone was mad at the elite. It was a good time. It was a lot of fun. But that's what started that. That's kind of what brought us together. We kind of, from there, I guess you almost kind of build up like a comedic camaraderie. It was almost like a comedy writing room in a sense, because you're sitting there like, what would be the most funny, and then you're also trying to be like, okay, but this is gonna be punchy, we don't be too long. Like it really is like you're just like working out the nuances of like, okay, what can we do here, like how's this funny, blah blah. And like, so it's almost like we kind of slowly came together and realized like oh, I think we might have something to hear. I mean, we had a huge group chat, and there were some of us who were like, we started kicking around the idea of having a podcast. And it kind of narrowed down to like, well, what people would actually want to do it. And then it started off with me, Toad, Cole, or you can call him Fat Dave, whichever one you want to call him. He's kind of goes by both. He needs to pick a brand already. But boom, boom, boom. And then also we had this dude named Cap and a dude named Nick Ashley. Those last two kind of dropped off over time. We had the original three that stuck around. And then over time, I think within like the second or third episode, we added Clint, and he's kind of just been around forever. There was like a long period of time where he was just like a regular guest. And after a while, I was just like, oh, you're one of us. And Reed, same deal. I mean, we started off pretty early, kind of same thing. We kind of acquired him. And then Top Lobster kind of came much later. But he was always kind of hanging out in the periphery anyways, because he was kind of like helping with art and just hanging out with a lot of us in general. And we just realized after a while, like, yo, you should hop on. And obviously Reed's kind of died off. He's not really there as much anymore, but he still comes in every now and then for a pinch hitting when we really need, someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's been really busy these days. But yeah, that's kind of how we came together. I mean, when it first started, it's also been like a long process of trying to figure out what the hell we were. Because when we first started, we literally were like, we almost saw it in a certain sense as like, I don't know, like your weekly breakdown, like ESPN, but like of towers, but like goof it off as well. We'd be like, oh, Tower of the Day. And it was just almost like a way for us to break off in a conversation off that stuff. It took us a while to kind of figure out. We've kind of gone through slightly different vibes over time of what we're going for, but I think we've kind of settled into what we kind of are. I mean, it may change over time, but I don't know. Yeah, that's what we are, Tower Gang. We are, for those who have not heard of it, it is a very offensive podcast, a very offensive comedic podcast. That's the attempt. We're not always.
I call it irreverent.
Yeah, irreverent. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, irreverent. I mean, I think I said the N-word like 3 times last episode. So, I mean, if you don't like that, don't watch it. So, I don't want to hear anyone complain.
It's one of the highlights of my week, because all the other podcasts I listen to are so serious, or they're tackling, current events or the news, or, I mean, that's the same thing, or politics, stuff like that. And, they can just get so serious, and you can get so black-pilled on that. And then I listen to you guys, and it's like a break from that. And it's also a break from like PC culture. you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that's what I
no.
appreciate about that podcast.
Yeah, and it's actually
Um,
kind of been that for us. I actually am kind of really glad I found that because I feel like not that I'm like an overly emotional or someone that would be prone to being like getting down the dumps or black pilled into a crazy degree, but it's been very helpful in kind of breaking it up. Because if I was just doing my serious content all the time, it would just drive me nuts. But that break in the monotony, or slight change in vibe at once a week, perfect. It's been great. Um, so like I feel like if I didn't, I'd probably end up infusing some of that into the show on my own, and I'm actually kind of glad because I don't really want that. I mean, don't get me wrong, and that's kind of like somewhat naturally to some extent who I am, so it comes across anyways. But it's not really the vibe I'm going for entirely. I do want to cover like serious topics, but like I don't know, I don't need to go like balls to the wall irreverent comedy on my podcast on my podcast. It just wouldn't fit with what I'm trying to do. So I don't know.
yeah.
I'm really glad we've had it. It's been kind of therapeutic, and I don't know. It's been fun for that, and people seem to enjoy it and keep coming back. So
Yeah, you got to have both, man. And
exactly.
yeah. So let's get to the main event of tonight. You've been making the rounds. We kind of mentioned earlier. You went on Timcast. You went on Part of the Problem. You've done a lot on your own podcast, No Way Jose, uh, about the Oklahoma City bombing and just kind of the like sus suicides around that.
hmm
Um, so do you kind of want to start from the beginning, kind of frame it, and then go into it a little bit?
I mean, that's pretty vague. So do you want to narrow down what you mean a
Well,
little bit? Because like, we're talking about Yeekey, we talk about the entire Oklahoma City bombing, or just kind of the
yeah.
overview of what I've been doing.
Let's start with the bombing.
Yes,
So the official narrative is that Timothy McVeigh and was it one other guy?
Timothy McVeigh and
They pulled it off.
Terry Nichols. No, is it Terry Nichols?
It's something
Terry.
Nichols.
I'm getting thrown out. Yeah, Terry. That's right, Terry. I just was thrown off because I've been doing a lot of Yeeky stuff, and that's his nickname. So I'm like, Terry? Yeah, that
Yeah,
just didn't seem right in my head. Yes, Terry Nichols, who would fill like a supporting role. He wasn't even in the state at the time of the bombing, but he did help in like I said, a supportive type way. Like there were things where it looked like he kind of helped him, get together some components for the bomb. He did quote unquote, rob this individual named Roger Moore, who was a buddy of Timothy McVeigh's. It was like clearly a fake robbery, where he robbed them to get funds from him to kind of to help financially support the endeavor of getting all the stuff together for the bombing, for the big bomb. Yeah, that is. And then yes, on April 19th, 1905, a Ryder truck pulled up to the Murrah building, the Murrah Federal building in Oklahoma City. He, one or two people, wink, wink, got out of that car, walked away, and shortly after, boom, exploded, killed something like I want to say 167, I think it's the number, 160 something people died in the blast. It was the largest domestic act of domestic terrorism in our country. I believe before 9/11 it was just the biggest act of terrorism in general, but I think 9/11 took the cake, beat it out there, so now you got to add that domestic to it. So yeah, it was a crazy stuff.
yeah, and it's so interesting listening to you kind of uncover all of this, because I feel like, especially if you were younger than our age group, you don't remember it at all, right?
mm.
And I don't remember it that much at all either.
I'm 31. How old are you?
I'm 33.
All right, yeah. So I mean, I was like 4, so you were like
Yeah,
6.
yeah.
Yeah, I have no recollection. So if
No,
anything,
so
I guess maybe that's part of the intrigue for me to some extent, because it was like a thing that wasn't really in my psyche. So as an adult, like I knew of it, but like it didn't really, the impact and the full scope degree, whatever, it didn't really set in until as an adult, and I was like, oh, because it was like for me,
and for
I had 9/11. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So yeah.
and for a lot of people, just the name of it they recognize, but they don't understand what actually happened, the impact that it made. And then on top of that, 9/11 overshadowed it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all you hear now. And it's just kind of it's living in 9/11 shadow. So it's been interesting. Like I'm going full circle again, but it's been interesting listening to you talk about it. Um, just because I never went in that much depth about it before listening to you.
Yeah, me either. I started this off. This literally started off with me kind of not knowing much. I mean, I kind of knew. I knew of the Oklahoma City bombing. I knew kind of the rough details, the official narrative. I obviously, being an anarchist and being a little bit like kind of, I already was aware and kind of hip to a lot of the conspiracy stuff already, but like never really gone deep. But I knew there was definitely some stuff more than we were telling you, but it was kind of like something that never really caught my, like I never really like dug into it. It's kind of like, okay, I don't know, like what really could there be more to this? And then it was Terry Yeakey that dragged me down. I found this Jinx. I don't know if you remember Jinx at Crack Connoisseur on Twitter. Anyone wants to find him? He kind of drops like what we call on Twitter edits, for those who aren't aware, which is just kind of like little videos that they people put together, kind of splice together images, text, whatever, and make cool little things there. And he made this one that was like a probably 2-3 minute video of Terrance Yeakey, and that whole story, just I know something about it just really popped to me, really caught my attention. I mean, the dude was like my age right now, like he was like 30. He had like 2 young daughters. Something about him, I just really identified with him. He, like I said, I was 11 years active duty, so like, and he was a cop. Like I know I saw a lot of parallels. He also looks a lot like one of my best friends. So it was like it just was really, I don't know, just really like sucked me in, and it kind of like, I was like, whoa, kind of got me emotionally. And from there, I was like, I need to look into this because it just seemed almost too fantastical. And once I looked into it, I was like, holy shit, no, this is like legit. Like, because I mean, most of the time when you hear these sort of stories, because I'm the kind of guy, like Top Lobster makes fun of me all the time because I'm not the kooky conspiracy guy. And I don't mean that to be demeaning. Actually, like, I'm not the guy that's like gets upset about the Alex Jones types or whatever. Because there are these in the conspiracy world, there's almost like these two sides where like you could almost say like the kooks, and then like I don't know if you want what the other term you could call for, but the ones who get like uppity about the kooks, I guess. You know what I mean? And to be fair, the ones that get uppity, it's like, I get it. It's because usually those are the guys that put in a lot of work, studied this stuff, really are very meticulous about making sure they put out the right facts. And then you have people like Alex Jones, like, they're literal demons. And you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I understand, I understand it, but I like both crowds personally. I mean, overall, I'm like, I get there are excesses in both, but I think both have their merits and the reason. One side's really just conspiracy entertainment, and I honestly tend to prefer the conspiracy entertainment realm for digging into stuff or just for enjoying, just to kind of peruse different conspiracies. I guess if I'm actually serious about a conspiracy, I'll try to find someone from the other side of the aisle because I'm like, okay, I want the facts. But like, I'm not an idiot. I'm able to understand, listen to these, what people would call kooks, and go, okay, well, that sounds like bullshit. Oh, wow, that's cool. But I'm still not going to I don't know, assert this essentially. I'm still going to be like, I may bring it up to people, but before I'm like, this 100% happened, I'll probably look into it a little bit more and see if there's some back sources to back it up. But, oh shit, I droned. I had a point. I was droning on there. But yeah, fuck, I forgot my entire point. But yeah, essentially, I like both of those crowds. God, what was my point? I was trying to tie it back to some. Oh, I remember, because it was like the whole point of that. Normally you see this type of stuff and you assume this is just kook shit. Because you hear stuff like this when you listen to some conspiracy entertainment type stuff where they'll be like, oh yeah, this guy, oh, he killed himself, oh, this is weird, and you're like, okay, well, it's probably a little kooky. There's probably a little bit more of the story, but whatever, that was entertaining. This one I looked into and I was like, holy shit, this is legit. Like, everything that Jinx put in this little video was legit, and you dig into it more, it even gets worse. So like, there's really not much in that backs up the official story. And from there, once I got into Yeakey, then I was kind of like, then that kind of is what kind of slightly pulls you into the Oklahoma City bombing. You're like, because obviously the key part of it is like, well, why did they kill him? Oh, this is connected to the Oklahoma City bombing. Oh, well, why would anyone care about that? Like, why would that be? And then you start digging deeper, and then you're like, holy shit. Like, because like, he is just kind of, Terrance Yeakey is just kind of like scratching at the surface of like the fuckery there. Like it goes even
Yeah.
deeper than what I usually go into. It gets like to crazy, like it expands. A lot of people, because you can start tugging on threads and just keep going with this story. And there's a lot of like legit stuff. And I'm not like I'm not once again not trying to disparage the people that are into conspiracy entertainment or whatever, but like, you know, people know what I mean. Like this is stuff that like, here's this source, this source, this source, this source. It's all backed up by XYZ. This is all legit stuff. You know what I mean? That like this is that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, so maybe for the audience, it makes more sense to talk about Terrance Yeakey before we go more into the Oklahoma City bombing. That way, you know, maybe they're drawn in the same way that you were.
Yeah.
So he died under suspicious circumstances, suicided. So
Yes.
do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. All right. Where to start? All right. I guess probably the bombing, probably the best place to start. All right, Terry. I've gone accustomed to calling him Terry lately, so people just letting people know this throws anyone off. But yes, he was one of the first, if not the first, responders into to the Oklahoma City bombing. Like I mentioned earlier, he was a cop. He was, you know, I think he was nearby working on some other case. I forget which specifically he was working on, but he was working on something close by. He was there, according to Tanya, his ex-wife, was something like within a minute. I don't know how true that is, if that's just hyperbolic, but I've heard places first. I've heard one of the first. Essentially, he was one of the first people to get into the building. From there, he saved, I think, at least 4 people is what I've heard. I've heard different amounts of the numbers, but kind of beside the point. He saved lives. He was a hero. I think on the last person he was saving, I think he fell through a floor or two and ended up hurting his back in the
Oof.
rubble. And I mean, he was all right. I mean, I guess he was in a little bit of rough condition, but you know, nothing too crazy. He ended up in the hospital. He left, I believe, like that day. So I mean, he probably should have stayed. He very much wanted to leave. According to his ex-wife Tanya, she's the one who picked him up, and one of the first things he said to her was, Tanya, it's not what they're telling you. Like in talking about the Oklahoma City bombing, and he didn't really ever expand on it much to her. And it seemed like he didn't want her to get her involved. I actually recently just saw Steven Vassar on my show, who was one of his buddies. And I don't remember if he actually said it in that show or if that was something he said or we said when we talked privately. But he mentioned that Terry also mentioned to him at one point, like, hey, I don't like kind of like alluding to this stuff, like, I don't want to get you involved kind of deal. And so it seemed to be his mentality when it came to stuff. He didn't want to get people that he cared about involved because he was concerned that someone could get hurt with whatever was going on. We kind of get into vague territory when we go, what did he know? But we do know, I want to suggest to people, I guess this might be the easiest way for you to find it. If you go to my channel and you go to pretty much, I have a few Yeekey centric episodes. And if you go to the video descriptions, I have in there links to different sources. There's I believe it's from 1997. There was a radio interview from Tanya, who was his ex-wife, that she did. There also is a great article from, I believe also from 1997, from an individual named Dave Hoffman, who it's actually at the Libertarian Institute, but it was written somewhere else. It's just archived there. And he wrote a great article on there. I want to say it was in Washington Weekly is where they posted. I might be wrong on that one, and then there was a recent CNN article that goes into all this stuff. So I just want to put that out there because I may not be able to hit all the details, but there's a lot in there. There's a lot to this story. But yes, he came out of there. He seemed very shaken up. And this was a common theme throughout. Tanya mentioned multiple times how he would say stuff along those lines. He seemed kind of, and I'm trying to think what else to add before we move on to the next point. I guess I could just kind of zoom forward.
He was
about
just
a
kind of
year.
spooked.
Yeah, spooked in general. I mean, there's a lot more to the different details and different little, anecdotal examples I can provide you. But leave it. Suffice it to say, he was freaked out. I guess I'll provide a couple, but for example, he tried to remarry his Tanya at one point. She, like I said, they have referenced she was ex-wife, but they had a good relationship. They seemed to be trying to rekindle things. There was actually a period of time where she said, in that radio interview, she actually said that she did say essentially they were trying to rekindle things, and she said that like he had actually gotten into the habit of when they were out together introducing her as his wife, as opposed to like his ex-wife or friend or whatever. And the way she says it almost sounds like she was kind of pleased by that, like she kind of liked that. And I mean, obviously she didn't stop him, so you can kind of tell where their relationship was at that point. But he had asked her was trying to get remarried, but the main reason he gave was because he was worried if anything happened to him, he wanted to make sure his family was taken care of. Which he died shortly later. I'm trying to think of other specific examples to provide, kind of his headspace. There was definitely also things going on with his other individuals within the force.
Wait, so back to
yeah.
marrying his ex again.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing that to maybe provide her with his pension or life insurance, that sort of thing,
yes.
in case that something happened to him.
Yes, okay. That was the point. He explicitly said that to Tanya, according to Tanya. But yeah, he God, where was that before? Yeah, he was having issues with his commanding officers and such, other individuals in the force. He had provided a 9-page report of what happened at the Oklahoma City bombing. What he saw, there was you can't find that report. That report's lost. And once again, Stephen Vaster that I brought up earlier, he looked himself. He couldn't find it. He also couldn't find his report. He was a John Doe 2 eyewitness, and he put that in his report, and that magically disappeared as well. But Terry had a 9-page report that he had back and forth, and according to Tanya, she said that she actually got a call from the house. They were looking for Terry, and this was from I can't think of her name right now, but essentially here, Joanna Upchurch, or no, Upchurch is the man. What the hell? I can't think of it. I'll think of it later. But there's 2 individuals. I believe Major Upchurch was the dude, and there's one below her that was like his, next commanding officer. And she was like, nope, she said something along the lines of Tanya, like, you need to make sure he sends back the different report and make sure that it's shorter or whatever, and if he's not, he's going to get reprimanded. Essentially, along those lines. These are things you can hear on the radio interview. I'm usually better at elocuting that, but like I mentioned earlier, a little hazy. But yes, but yeah, he God, what did the fuck did I even just say? Man, I am really out of it. He fucking all right. Boom, boom, boom. Oh yes, the God, I'm so fucking. What did I just say? I'm really fucking spacey right now. Do you remember what I just said? I promise I'm not stoned at all. I'm sober as hell. But anyways, yes. Oh, the report. They were very much wanting to.
And she got a phone call.
Yes, she got a phone call. They want him to do it. But anyways, we'll zoom forward. Let's to the time. Essentially, they at one point later they find, this is roughly like a year or so after the bombing, and this is shortly before. There were a lot of stuff that I mentioned was happening like right before he did die. But they found his car was found. There was a car found in a parking lot in I think it was like west of Oklahoma City, off in an area called Canadian County. It was in a different county. They found it there. It was found by Mike Ramsey, I believe. Yeah, that's correct. Mike Ramsey, who was the individual, at least according to David Hoffman's article, that was Dave Ramsey, not Dave Ramsey, Mike Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is some money guy, Christian money guy, but Mike Ramsey, he found the body, not the body, the car that was covered in blood. There were reports that it looked like the side panels had kind of been torn up, the door, like things were like all yanked apart. There was it looked like there were burns on the floor mats. Like it looked like someone was it looked almost like someone was like burning paper on the floor, so kind of deal. And then that kind of obviously, once people found that, they're kind of like, oh, obviously there became then a search kind of go. Mike ran. Then they start looking for the body. Obviously, shortly later find it, and the body was kind of found in a ditch. About lowest estimates I've heard is a half mile. Highest as I've heard is a mile and a half distance from the car. Now the body was discovered with multiple lacerations to the wrist, throat, like deep ones, so deep that they, according to Tanya, they stitched them back up. Apparently on one of the reports, they wrote it superficial, but it was past the point where they felt they needed to stitch the body up. So like, how superficial really is that? Like, and the medical examiners, I believe, said the same thing as well, that, they found it. I believe this is from Tanya and the Hoffman article, but yes, they, so multiple lacerations, throat, wrist. There were, in the wounds, there was grass and dirt, which would indicate like dragging, or I guess you could say crawling, theoretically. Although, like, let's be real. I also want to add to this. Terry was sickle cell anemic. So, because my point why I mentioned this is because we find the body a half mile to a mile and a half away from the car. And the car is covered in blood. So you got to kind of figure out, like, how do we square these things? So, like, what people would want you to believe if it's a suicide is that he went from the car to that area, then shot. I left out there was a bullet to the head, but and then did all that damage in the car, causing all that blood, and then decided to go that far. Which, even without the sickle cell anemia, according to the medical reports, it looks like he lost like 2 pints of blood, which that's not technically enough to kill you, 2 pints, but it's like almost enough to kill you.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so you're probably going to be lightheaded. You may struggle to stand. Like, he's already an anemic individual, so like, like, even just like, he's already prone to blood loss. So like, and it's going to make him weaker than most. So he's not going, like, it's ridiculous to expect him to get from one to the other. But anyways, like,
even on the low end, crawling a half mile is quite a feat.
Yes. And it was also in rough terrain, through barbed wire fences, like grass, like he would have to literally go over it's not feasible. It's just ridiculous concept. Yeah. But yes, he traveled. All right. Anyways, there was the bullet in the head. And the key things about the gun, or about the bullet, is, well, also with the gun, is the gun wasn't found until the second, because one point is the Canadian county initially, they're the ones, because that was in a different county. It wasn't in the jurisdiction of Terry's police department. But almost immediately, Terry's police department took it over. But the reason why I mentioned this, because I believe the gun wasn't found until his police department showed up. So, and that may sound insignificant.
The other police department did the initial.
Yeah, I got an initial look around. I forget the exact amount of time, but obviously it's going to take a while for an entire different department to show up. So even if that was an hour or 30 minutes, it's significant. Because, and the reason why it's significant, and like I was saying, it may sound insignificant to some people, but if you domed yourself, where is the gun going to be? Like, if I blew yes, it's going to probably be within 5 feet. Like, I can't imagine in any way that you could shoot yourself, unless somehow it involuntarily causes a spasm, and you. But that doesn't make much sense. I don't know. Maybe there's some way you could hit it just right that it did something weird like that. I don't know. But like, even still, like, I don't know. Like, what is that? Maybe 10 feet I could throw a gun if I spasmed like that. I don't know. But either way,
if you see a gun wound to the head, you're also probably looking for that gun.
Yes, exactly. So the gun wasn't found nearby until later. So even if it's only 30 minutes, it's significant, which I believe it was longer. But either way, doesn't matter. It wasn't until the other police department showed up. But significant part about it is it was coming from a downward angle. Like, the bullet trajectory would be going a downward angle. I've messed this up before and said the inverse, but like, essentially coming from the top of the skull down, kind of a little bit kilted off, kind of like a little bit, I'm trying to do it just right, but like,
it's like uncomfortable to even.
Yes, that's
get
the point.
Angle
like,
right.
That's the point. I almost considered, like, I should just go grab my pistol. And I was like, wait, no, that's not a good idea. like on stream, just but but anyways, yes, you could tell how that's uncomfortable. And Terry was a big dude. Terry was like over 6 foot tall. I believe he was somewhere in the range of like 240, 260, something like that. Big dude, corn-fed fella. And not like a fat, not like a fat guy. Like he was, I mean, don't get me wrong, he wasn't like skinny trim either. He was built like I think like probably like a tight end, or something along those lines. He's a big boy, he's corn-fed, but all right. So yes, I mean, this is an awkward position for me and you. Now this guy's even bigger than us. And then also on top of that, to add to it, you can tell they call it a stellate, I believe is the term for it, where if you do dome yourself like literally point blank, it will leave an indication from like muzzle flash, from like gunpowder, whatever the different things the gun does at that point in time when it's pressed up directly to something when you fire it. It will leave a distinct mark. Didn't have that. So the point being is like it couldn't have been point blank or close. It would have had to be, I mean, I don't know how far it would have to be in the realm of what's considered like that wouldn't leave that stellate or something indicating it was close. But even if it's a little bit like now you're like, I can understand somewhat maybe it was point blank shooting from that, because like right there, okay, all right, whatever, you're just resting the gun there. But now if you're like, okay, now I'm back here and having to like aim
like, it doesn't seem like
from
you
the
would
back,
go through the trouble of that. Yeah.
like why? Like it just makes it's just weird. Like what were we just doing target practice from the back? Let's try to do it blind for fun. I don't know. Like I mean, I guess not technically from the back because it's like a little bit kilted off because it's like off to here. But either way, still pretty implausible. I mean, technically it's possible, but what a weird way to do yourself in. But
so was this the original findings of the original police force, or was this like a autopsy?
Now that's another thing. There was no autopsy conducted. None.
What?
These are a lot of these are based off like medical examiner notes. There was one medical examiner, report, which is the one that a lot of this comes from. There was another one that was like floating around for a while. There was like that somehow then immediately just got like disappeared. So that one's almost in like a legend status thing. So like there are people who talk about seeing it and will allude to stuff on it. But for the most part, like, and I will say some of the things I did say aren't said that way in it. Like I kind of alluded to with like superficial lacerations. I believe that was what was in the initial medical report. So, but now then you get into other, there were reports from some of the medical examiners. There's Tanya. I mean, a lot of this is kind of word of mouth or different sources here, there. So a lot of this is kind of accumulated together. But I believe I want to say the grass and the dirt, I don't believe was in the medical report, but the lacerations to the wrist, the throat, the gun, basically the key points are there. But some of the other stuff I mentioned were things that were kind of like gleaned from other sources. Once again, I'd suggest people go read those articles. You can see for yourself where a lot of this comes from. And it's, almost entirely legit. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like whenever you're dealing with sources and this and that, there's differing levels of credibility to each one. So it's like, if I come to find out like, oh, I don't know, there was some mistake and there wasn't grass and dirt in the wounds, I'd be like, okay, well, I mean, it didn't really change much. I'd be like, okay, well, I'll just make sure to not say that next time. I'm not technically asserting it, but I do believe that was the case based on my looking into it. But you can read the end notes. You can look into all the different stuff. You can see, it seems legit. That is what I currently believe. Now, would I assert some of the minutia of some of that stuff? I don't know. But the main key points of the things I brought up are like legit, like in the medical exam reports and stuff. So yes, once again, I suggest people dig into it because when you get into the weeds of that kind of stuff, that is kind of like it's kind of hard to have that because you're like, oh, I got this source, that source, this source. It's almost like, okay, give me a minute, I'll come back to you and I'll be able to show you my sources because it's hard to like spit them off the top. But yes, this isn't all just in that one medical report, but the key points are the ones that matter, like the I believe. Like, yes, the lacerations, the gunshot, obviously the car from the distance from the car. I'm not the distance, but the where his body was found, the fact that he was from distance from the car. Like these are things that are like not even slightly in dispute. So like just those simple facts enough are alone. But some of the stuff is extra stuff I did provide. But God, lost my point trying to like recall which specific thing went to which specific source. But yes, majority of that stuff is in the medical report, but or the medical examiner's report. But yes, they found the body. I'm trying to think what else. Yes, they whenever they first discovered the body, the Canadian county, they called out a murder. They immediately called out for a murder investigator to kind of examine the scene, but when his police department, the OCPD, showed up, they immediately, I guess I say immediately, but basically immediately determined it was a suicide, is what they called it. And like I said, there was no autopsy performed, which is insane, under the circumstances, considering it was a police officer. I have heard, because I mentioned before, that one police department took over from the other. Now, apparently, I guess that's not that normal. But I've heard people say that sometimes in cases where a larger department will take over from a smaller police department due to the whole aspect of like they would have more resources to be able to deal with certain things. But that logic doesn't check out when you basically use none of your resources. There was basically nothing done. The family received his bloody car the next day, and they found a knife like stashed under the like the glove box, like in kind of like in a nudge. So like like this is the degree to which their investigation was
for processing.
Basically, like you look into it, there are, because some of the things that you hear from people, there are people who try to tout the official narrative that have alluded to, and when I say people, I mean like people that mattered at that time. People within the department, higher ups, did kind of allude to things like, well, maybe it was drugs, maybe it was alcohol, but did they run a drug test? No, basically nothing was done. It was the most scant of investigations there really was. And yeah, it's basically like borderline disrespectful to the family. It's actually,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know what the proper procedure is if you have someone's bloody car, like what do you do with that? But like, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, maybe you do turn in the bloody for some reason or other. I struggle to find a reason, but the knife is the big thing. Like, how do you not find this knife? Like his brother-in-law, I don't believe really tried too hard. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if you've listened to like true crime podcasts or anything like that, but in any case that I've heard of that, they nearly do more for just some rando person on those episodes than they do for this, this hero and a police officer. And, on top of that, like police officers are known for like taking care of their own and like, that whole thing.
Yes.
So yeah, it's very sus
until you cross that line.
Yeah.
So there's a stark difference here between one treatment and another, and I think that tells you something here. Obviously that's not something you can draw strong conclusions from, but it implies a few things. That's not a good look. It doesn't indicate a high trust. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other meaningful things to bring up. Yes, they made it labeled suicide. All
right, so why Yeakey?
Why Yeakey?
Yeah. What's the point of suiciding him?
Back to why. Actually, if you give me a second, I'll go ahead and just right here read for people I could actually literally still have it in my tab, so it'll be super easy to find. This will explain a lot right here. This is actually an excerpt from the Hoffman article. This is a letter from Terry to an individual named Ramona, which Ramona was actually in both articles. She was in this Hoffman article. If you go look in the CNN article, there's actually new statements from her later. Although to be technical, technically speaking, we don't know these are the same person because Ramona is spelled different in both ones. But and in the CNN one, there's a last name, whereas there isn't one in the Hoffman. And in the CNN one, they said something about how she changed her name. So she's clearly kind of being an anonymous individual. But I've also seen the family show this letter before too. I believe it may have been the family actually discovered the letter from Terry to Ramona. But anyways, I guess people can dig deeper to find, if they want to find the credibility of this. But all right, just give me a second. Crap, I had it up. All right, here we go. Dear Ramona, I hope that whatever you hear now in the future will not change your opinions about myself or others within the Oklahoma City Police Department. Although some of the things I'm about to tell you about is very disturbing. I don't know if you recall everything that happened that morning or not, so I'm not sure if you know what I'm referring to. The man that you and I were talking about in the pictures I have made the mistake of asking too many questions as to his role in the bombing and was told to back off. I was told by several officers he was an ATF agent and who was overseeing the bombing plot. And the time the photos were taken, he was calling his report of what had just went down. I think my days as a police officer are numbered because of the way my supervisors are acting. And there's a lot of secrets floating around now about my mental state of mind. I think they're going to write me up because I'm an ex-wife and a VPO. I told you about talking to Chaplain Poe. Well, the bastard wrote up in a report stating I should be relieved of my duties. I made the mistake of thinking that a person's conversation with a chaplain was private, which, by the way, might have cost my job as a police officer. A friend at headquarters told me that Poe sent out letters to everyone in the department. That bitch, Joanne Randall, in parentheses, so you know who it is. Joanne Randall, that was the name I'm trying to think of earlier. I couldn't think of it. I told you about is up to something, and I think it has something to do with Poe. If she gets her way, they will tar and feather me. I was told that Jack Poe has written up a report on every single officer that has been in to see him, including Gordon Martin and John Avery. Knowing what I know now and understanding fully just what went down that morning makes me ashamed to wear a badge from Oklahoma City's police department. I took an oath to uphold the law and to enforce the law to the best of my ability. This is something I cannot honestly do and hold my head up proud any longer if I keep my silence as I'm ordered to do. There are several others out there who was sick. I forget what that means when they put it in transcribing articles. What we saw, and even some who played a role in what happened that day. 2 pages missing. My guess is that the more time an officer has to think about the screw up, the more he is going to question what happened. Can you imagine what would be? Let me see how much longer this is. I thought it was shorter. Oh yeah, this is longer. But okay. I mean, if you want me to keep going, I can go. I mean, it probably is. That's probably like half of it. So I thought it was shorter for some reason. Huh?
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do.
My guess is the more time an officer has to think about the screw up, the more he's going to question what happened. Can you imagine what would be coming down now if that had been our officers who had let this happen? Because it was the feds that did this and not the locals is the reason it's okay. You were right all along, and I am truly sorry I doubted you and your motives about recording history. You should know that it's going to be one hell of a fight. Everyone was behind you until you started asking questions I did as to how so many federal agents arrived at the scene at the same time. Luke Franny, a BATF agent who claimed he was in the building, was not in the building at the time of the blast. I know this for a fact. I saw him. I also saw full riot gear worn with rifles in hand. Why? Don't make a mistake as I did and ask the wrong people. I worry about you and your young family because of some of the statements that have been made towards me, a police officer. Whatever you do, don't confront McPherson with the bomb squad about what I told you. His actions of defensiveness towards the bombing would make any normal person think he was defending himself as if he drove the damn truck up to the building himself. I am not worried for myself, but for you and your group. I would not be afraid to say at this time that you and your family could be harmed if you get any close to the truth. At this time, I think for your well-being, it is best for you to distance yourself and others from those of us who have stirred up too many questions about the altering and falsifying of the federal investigations reports. I truly believe there are other officers like me out there who would not settle for anything but the truth. It is just a matter of finding them. The only true problem, as I see it, is who do we turn to them? It is vital that people like you, Eddie Smith, and others keep asking questions, demanding answers for the actions of our federal government and law enforcement agencies that knew beforehand and participated in the cover-up. The sad truth of the matter is that they have so many police officers convinced that by covering up the truth about the operation gone wrong, that they are actually doing our citizens a favor. What I want to know is how many other operations have they had that blew up in their faces? Makes you stop and take another look at Waco. I would consider it to be an insult to my profession as a police officer and the citizens of Oklahoma for any of the city, state, or federal agents that stood by and let this happen to be recognized as anything other than their part in participation in letting this happen. For those who ran from the scene to change their attire to hide the fact they were there should be judged as cowards. Yeah, I have like 4 paragraphs. I remember this being way shorter in my head. If our history books and records are ever truly corrected about that day, it will show this and maybe even some lame excuse as to why it happened, but I truly don't believe it will from what I know now to be the truth. Or now know. Even if I try to explain it to you the way it was explained to me and the ridiculous reason for having our own police departments falsify reports to their fellow officers, the citizens of the city into our country, you would understand why I feel the way I do about all this. I believe that a lot of the problems the officers are having right now are because some of them know what really happened and can't deal with it. And others, like myself, made the mistake of trusting the one person we were supposed to be able to turn to, only to be stabbed in the back. I am sad to say that I believe my days as a police officer are numbered because of all of this. There you go. That's the end of it. Yes, that was
Interesting.
yes.
I
And
pulled.
Ramona was go ahead.
I was just gonna say I pulled two things that I thought were interesting from that. I thought it was interesting that they called it an operation gone wrong, and then I wonder what was said to the chaplain.
Yes,
that he repeated to Yeakey's superiors.
Yes, I don't know.
Do we know it? We don't know.
Not
any
really.
Of that?
No, we don't know the specifics of that. I would like to find out one of these days. So if anyone ever watches my show that knows someone or is one of those individuals who know one of these people or whatever, let me know. What's up? But yes, because there were, like he did mention, there were a couple other people he thought had similar issues. And, I'm assuming they may still be alive out and about. So, but yeah, no, we don't know the specifics. That is one of the big things about this stuff is there aren't. He was never very explicit. That was probably the most explicit that you would ever find out of Terry right there. Like that letter I gave you is probably like if we were to assume that like if we assume, not even assume, like I actually think it is, but like if you like believe that is actually Terry's like words right there, that is damning as fuck. Like, I mean, obviously, doesn't have anything to back it up there, but that provides the narrative of like, why. So, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, I guess he could have been crazy or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't really. I struggle to think why anyone would write that letter if that wasn't legit, and like if it was Terry. Like, I mean, I guess you could say maybe someone else did it to cook up some craziness. Even that's like it gets crazy, especially. I mean, yes, that'd be a little nuts. But although I guess that could be a thing. I don't know. I mean, I guess when you start digging this, you get a little schizo, and you're like, you doubt every little thing because you're like, I don't want to put too much trust in this one source because you never know. This could be a limited hangout or some nonsense. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I believe it's
well,
true.
So he clearly, since he was one of the first people there, he clearly saw some stuff that maybe he was not intended to see. And then
sister LaShawn said, I mean, obviously it's secondhand information, but according to LaShawn, she said something along the lines that Terry mentioned that he saw areas where it looked like it blew out as opposed to in. And the key point is this was a truck bomb. I don't know why I totally blanked that earlier. I didn't mention it was I did mention the Ryder truck there and there was a bomb, but it was like an ammonium nitrate bomb, like an ANFO bomb is what they call them. It's just like a fertilizer.
It's a bunch of fertilizer.
Bomb. Yeah. They put in front of it. But it was parked like 60 feet in front of the building. So, if things 60 feet away from the target blows up, the explosion is going to be coming in or, going in. And now, so if you're seeing things that are blowing out, that is the opposite. Now that indicates there are other explosives, which, I mean, now that gets into the weeds of more John Doe or more OKC stuff, because that is a whole other thing, is the bombing aspects, because they're, the ATF themselves, I don't know if they technically ever admitted it, but it's basically just like accepted at this point. There are pictures or there's all sorts of things where they were storing munitions in that building improperly. Like they weren't supposed to be doing that. Like, I mean, this is literally a building like, I mean, I don't know what the correct thing you're supposed to do with like stuff like that, like tow missiles and crap like that. But like, I mean, I feel like they probably should have storage locations for that instead of like just where the general public's hanging out. But and kids and stuff. But because that's the big thing people always bring up is there's a daycare there. But yeah, yes,
I read that he parked the truck underneath the daycare, like there's a drop off area. Is that correct or no?
I think you might be right. I don't know if I've actually ever looked in specifically in that one little tiny thing, like if where specifically the thing was, because I don't really ever get too much into like the bombing stuff, really the weeds of that, because you can go nuts. So I've never really been like analyzing the building and being like, where was this or that? That sounds right. Things. I feel like I've seen pictures that I recall that, though. I believe that might be correct. Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure. Yeah, I have no idea. That was just off of
Yeah.
Wikipedia in the little research I did
You might
before. You
you
know
might
what
be
I mean?
right. I forget. I mean, obviously, I know the pictures in my mind of it blown up, but I don't really. I've seen far less photos of it not blown up. So it's kind of like what was there. Unless you're getting really down the weeds of like the specifics of the bomb stuff, which we were kind of getting to, like what was the deal with the bombs, But go on, what were you gonna say?
Well, just kind of going on the bomb tangent. Another one of the things was people have mentioned that there are bombs in the building,
Yes.
and then kind of tied to that, some of the rescue efforts were called off
Mm,
again and again due to that. And then
yes.
turns out there were never any bombs in there, or at least that went off. Is that
Yeah. You said there weren't any bombs going off, or were? What did you say there? I'm sorry, I
oh,
missed that
I
last.
was saying there weren't any other bombs that went off after the rescue efforts commenced. Is that true?
Oh yes, yeah, that's true. Well, I thought you were saying like at the time of it, like if there were secondary bombs. I'm like, I don't know if there was or
Well,
not.
like
That's
like
what we're talking about.
two
But
set
I
two
get what you're
separate
saying. Yeah,
yeah,
yes,
two
there were.
separate things. There's
Yeah.
theories that there were extra bombs in the building. That's one thing. And then the
Yes.
second part is due to that, rescue efforts were called off multiple times. And then none of those bombs went off or were pulled out or anything like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, where I was talking about the claim that LaShawn, I believe, his sister, said that Terry made about like that it blew out as opposed to in, because now that gets into the bombing stuff. Now, what was that? Was that And I think what I was getting at is on the light end, like best case scenario, it's the ATF was improperly storing stuff there, and maybe there were secondary explosions. Maybe there weren't secondary explosions. Maybe that claim by Terry was wrong. But even when we get into the specific bombing side of this, best case scenario, that is what happened, is that they were improperly storing things, and now maybe they didn't go off. But now, if you're saying people who say stuff like, because there are multiple claims from different people about things about like blowing out as opposed to in, reports of secondary explosions, or even people who said they thought they saw charges, which now that obviously wouldn't be the ATF. That would be a different thing. That would be another level. But like my point I'm getting is on the light end, the ATF was improperly storing it. But now, if there were secondary explosions or explosions that appeared to blow out as opposed to in, now that could be the best case scenario, which is still really bad. That could have been a like secondary explosions from the munitions they were storing there. Because I mean, if you have an explodable thing and you explode another thing next to the explodable thing, it's going to explode that thing. But now, on the high end, like I just mentioned, there were two eyewitnesses, and I don't know this, I forget the specifics, but I do want to tell people, if they any of these things that I claim, go into libertarianinstitute.org, go click on the Oklahoma City bombing archive, and there is literally, go to the search bar, type in whatever thing I said, it will search it for you like a Google search, and it will bring up all the different documents. You can find all this stuff. You can find everything to back up every claim I've made, pretty much. And if you find out I fucked up one, let me know. I feel like I've been pretty good about keeping those things right. Try not to make specific claims if I'm a little hazy. But anyways, yeah, there were two eyewitnesses who saw what looked like people in the garage that were setting things that kind of like putty type. Basically look like charges, look like plastic charges or whatever you call it. The looks like, and it was like kind of like a how do I put this? Almost like they said they look like a construction crew, is what they said, of people that were kind of putting these things up places. And yeah, and that is so a lot, because a lot of people like to allude to that the government itself blew up the building. So which maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. I don't really take a strong stance on the bombing, because when you get into that gets into like minutia of like, I don't know, nerd bomb stuff, if that makes sense. Like, like expert stuff. And then it just goes, well, my expert says this. And then my expert says, well, no, my expert says this. And because then it gets into gets way too academic. You're comparing like, I don't know what the bombing capability of this thing as opposed to this thing. And a lot of people, I think, get lost in the weeds there, where it's
Yeah.
like, don't get me wrong, that does like that matters, but it's also like something we're probably gonna never really, prove. And it's also compared to other things, it doesn't matter, if that makes sense. Like
Sure.
whether it was, because like I said, on the light end, the ATF fucked up, and this was even saying there were no secondary explosions. They were storing things, and even then, like you said, they called off rescue efforts for those. So, like, the reason for calling off the rescue efforts was to get rid of, to take some of that munitions. Like, that is basically, I don't know if you can call it the official narrative, but it's basically just widely accepted at this point. And there, like I said, there were pictures. There are many people who attest this. Like, yeah, they were that. The reason why they called it off is because there were other explosives in the building, and they wanted to stop to get them out. So
that's an important point to make clear to people listening now or later. The ATF was covering their ass, and in doing so, by calling off rescue efforts, more people died that did not have to die.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, you can say it was covering your ass. I mean, I don't remember the specifics about to what degree they did try to lie or whatever. I'm sure they did for a while until the gig was up. But it also, to be fair, you could also say it would be doing the right thing, because you need to remove if you do have crazy explosives in there, you want to get that out of there before you do cause secondary explosions or something, and you cause way more damage, and then you kill a bunch of cops that are in there saving people and, paramedics or whatever. But so I guess in a certain sense, that may have been the right thing to do. I don't know. I guess it depends on what it was. But
I can see that.
Either way, it's still their fuck up, and because of their fuck up, people probably literally died because of it, even if there weren't secondary explosions from any of that stuff, just from calling off the rescue efforts for those 2 periods of time. So, yeah, I mean, it's still like, there's still, on the very light end, it's very bad, and no one is really like paid for it at all. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
So sticking with the ATF, I want to go back to something that you said. Yeakey, you said that Yeakey saw, was it the ATF that showed up minutes later or however long in full force? And
well, that wasn't, I don't remember if he specified which agency it was, if it was ATF, FBI, whatever. But I think the things you're talking about are kind of like almost two separate things, because he did make some claim about seeing some ATF guy that was making, calling in a report. I don't really know what to make of that, because that's all I've ever really seen at all about like that. I believe he said that was Luke Franey, I believe is what he said. That was that specific guy. I don't know. One of these days I need to go try to tug on that thread, see what I can figure out. But I really feel like there's probably not much. It's probably just going to be what Yeakey says. And unless like Ramona comes out of the woodworks and decides to, say some craziness and, actually prove who she is. And I don't know. I don't really know what we can really do to dig into that. I mean, I might look into it one of these days. And then there's a separate thing of the fact that, according to him, it sounds like basically almost as soon as he got there, there were already feds there. I can't remember if he specified if they're ATF, FBI, whatever, but feds. The ATF aspect's kind of beside the point, just feds in general. Actually, you know what? It was ATF. You know what? Now you say it was ATF. Yep.
Well, the reason I was thinking that is because in one of the things that I heard you on, it was probably on Part of the Problem, but you're talking about how the ATF were not even in the building.
Yes.
When this bomb went off.
Yep. According to God, I meant to memorize this guy's name because I need to get the better at remembering this part. But there was an individual who, him and along with his supervisor, once again, go type this libertarianinstitute.org and you can type in, I'm trying to think of keywords, but think of a few keywords, you'll be able to find it real easily. But essentially there was an individual, 2020 that he tried to go on, or was it? I think he went on 2020, I believe. Might be wrong on that. This was like also backed up by his supervisor that was there with him. The individual was at the site looking for his wife, kind of the rubble, trying to figure out what was going on. He talked to an ATF agent while he was there. The ATF agent told him that they received a beeper to not show up that day. Remember the old days, the beepers. But yes, they so obviously they probably didn't get a whole big explanation why. It literally was just a beeper. Probably had code or said don't come in or something. and that was it. Probably they're like, okay, because I'm not coming in. So they probably didn't need much more explanation than that. But yes, none of the ATF agents were there. There were some crazy stories that came out from them. Like they changed their story a few times about why they weren't there. I think they ended up settling on that they had a overnight surveillance mission or something like that. But
well, even changing your story makes you look suspect.
Yes, it does.
You know?
And then one of the things, one of the ATF agents made up a crazy story. It seemed to be like they were trying to make it sound like, oh, we were here and we were heroes. Made up some story about falling something ridiculous about 9 floors in an elevator, busting out of it, getting out of there, trying to saving lives, blah, blah, blah. And it was funny because like, I think they must have, I can kind of understand why someone would hear that and think, oh, falling in an elevator. And like, you just think like in an elevator, something about the physics is different. You feel like, oh, okay, we're good. Like, no, if you free fell in an elevator, you're free falling. It's no different really than falling that far. It's like, I don't know if people have this weird concept of what elevators do. Cause normally you come down and woo, or just like you're within a thing that's falling. I don't know if it just like is a mind fuck for people. I don't know. I can kind of understand it, but I can't put my finger on exactly why someone would think that. But either way, they made up some story. They felt like not something ridiculous, like 9 floors busted out. The elevator technicians later, basically like I guess elevators made after a certain point in time. I don't know the specifics mechanically how this works, but they're able to tell if they were in free fall conditions. The way the elevators were made at that time and now, you could tell. Like they're just like, he's like, okay, this didn't fall in a free fall because I can tell you by looking at this. And then 2,
of course,
if it did fall in free fall, I'd like to ask this guy how lucky he feels to be alive. So let alone go around and save lives or whatever, So I don't know, that is weird. I mean, I don't know really what to make of that one. I mean, we just know they weren't there. I mean, you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that, but it doesn't look good. I'll tell you that. Yeah. I mean, it could have just been complete luck. I don't know, but not a good look.
One of the other things I want to ask about is the John Doe 2 and why that is important.
John Doe 2. Well, over 20 people saw him with McVeigh that day before and after the bombing. I think what else? I mean, here's a good way to put it. It was also the reason why it's so important and sticks in people's minds. It was like one of the biggest manhunts in U.S. history, if not I think for a period of time it was the biggest. Maybe something has taken the title since then, but it was huge. It was a big deal. And what did I say? The April 19th is the bombing. So from April to May. So April, they essentially start looking for this guy roughly around that period of time. In May, there's an internal memo within the FBI, sending out to all the kind of street agents, everyone in general, saying, hey, all John Doe 2 leads put into abeyance. Abeyance is a fancy law enforcement term for essentially don't pursue. And this is in May. And then in June, the following month, then they came out publicly and said, no, this dude doesn't exist. And the funny thing is the individuals that the state used to convict McVeigh as being the individual who did the bombing, who was there, whatever, did all these things, those same eyewitnesses who used that, they like corroborated, kind of pieced together the story, like he was here, he was there, he was there. These were almost all of them were the people that were also claiming there was another individual. But then later they say, oh, no, that guy didn't exist. And they're like, and it's just a matter of why? Why did you just drop this? Especially when I believe one of the first speeches Clinton and many other higher ups, around that time, the important people, the elites, whatever, they all made these speeches about how we will leave no stone unturned and there will be justice and blah, blah. And then within 2 months, they just completely dropped this one dude who was like blatantly there. Like you expect us, like, I get it. Eyewitness reports aren't the most reliable, but it's different.
But all 20 of them are saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. All 20 of them are saying that. And even if it was only like say you only had one eyewitness, and this eyewitness claimed to see one person, seemed to see 2 people, and interacted with them verbally and then you just want to say, oh, you just imagine this one guy. One guy doesn't exist, but I'm going to completely take your word on the other guy. That guy, yep, that's legit. We'll send him to the we'll send him to get killed by the state for this. I forgot my point, but yes, it's John Doe 2. Wild shit.
Well,
Trying to think of what else. There's some other shit. Well, go ahead.
another part of that is they did so well with the sketch for McVeigh, right? And was there a sketch for the second guy?
Yes, there was a sketch.
Yeah,
you could
so
probably bring it up right now.
And the sketch for McVeigh looked identical, right? And so kind of the point of that is like the second one would be identical to this John Doe 2, and then they just drop it. Am I kind of pulling on that thread correctly with the sketch part?
I know people have stated, I've seen the John Doe 1, which is McVeigh one, and it does look like him. I've said people say it look uncanny. I think there's another one people are referring to. I've never really taken the time to look into that one to see, because it's kind of like, yeah, it was McVeigh. I mean, once you analyze all the different evidence, it's like, dude, this is McVeigh. Did I? Oh, crap. Yeah, I brought that out. There you go. There's your John Doe 2. That is the guy. He was described as being something like I believe 5'7", 5'9" He was described as having darker skin. He was described as having a muscular build. When I say darker, I mean like kind of like a racially ambiguous kind of thing, like a not like he was like black or whatever, or even like it's crazy dark. He's one of those individuals that could have been whatever.
Top.
A top. I mean, me with a tan. But like he, was a big dude. He, they made note about having muscular neck. He had a dragon tattoo, I believe, on his left arm. I'm trying to think what else there was specifically about him. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. I think dark hair. I think I, kind of got all the most of the stuff there. And now, though, the thing is, like, the big thing about John Doe 2 that continues to elude people to this day is the people who have actually studied, look into Oklahoma City and start digging into the Oklahoma City bombing, start digging into the stuff, understanding the story, the different characters involved. He doesn't really fit any of these characters. Like, because, I mean, you have people, the people usually try to be like Terry Nichols. Obviously, it's definitely not Terry Nichols. You have an individual named Michael Brescia. Some people think it's him. Andreas Strassmeyer. Some people think it's him, but doesn't really look like either of them. Andreas Strassmeyer is like over 6 feet tall. He's also skinny. Michael Brescia was like pasty, and he was skinny at the time. He looks more like him now because I've seen pictures of him to this day where he's had more of a tan. And, when he's bigger and buffer, but at the time he was kind of pasty and skinny. So there wasn't him. There's Michael Brescia, Strassmeyer, who other individuals would I be? Richard Lee Guthrie. There was a period of time where people sort of thought it was him, but he doesn't really look like him. He doesn't have a muscular build. He's pot-bellied. But yeah, basically once you go through all these people, and none of them are really that dark or anything. So like it doesn't really fit the description of any of them. So it's like, who is this dude and why are they trying so hard to protect him? Weird. Or not protect him. Why do they not care that much? Or they just drop it? Like, what's the reasoning here? I mean, I kind of understand when it comes to the trial of McVeigh, because that's when people focus on is that in the trial of McVeigh, they always try to skirt away from John Doe 2. I can kind of get that, because from a legal perspective, okay, I guess I get it. You'd want to like focus in on McVeigh and kind of separate these things. Be like, no, we're not focusing this. We're prosecuting McVeigh right now. But in the larger sense, and like in the FBI doing their other investigations, why are we dropping this? It makes no sense. Like, so because there was the FBI themselves that dropped it. So far as the court case, I mean, I can understand in the court case skirting around it or trying not to address it, because this is kind of like, if you're prosecuting McVeigh, you're like, well, why are we talking about this other guy? Like, does this have anything to do with whether he did or not? If not, like, I don't care. But so far as the FBI investigation, what's going on here?
That's wild, man. So kind of a couple more points before we wrap this up. I want to get into why this matters and what the takeaway is for us today, and how it's applicable to what we're seeing today.
Why it matters? Well, for one, there are people still in places in high positions of power that had their hand in this stuff. Probably the biggest names that people think about. One of these, technically, I don't think is in power, any sort of position power was right now, but was recently. But Merrick Garland, he was, I don't know, you wouldn't call him like the lead prosecutor, but he kind of, in some senses, almost kind of filled that role in some places. But he played a huge part in prosecuting McVeigh. He also he like he had I forget the specific dates. This is actually something that Richard Booth, the guy that I've had on, discovered through FOIA requests. I believe he FOIA'd something like the White House to figure out what their like guest log was around that time. And then also then Ken Silva, who's also been on my show multiple times as a journalist, I think he broke that story, using Booth's stuff. But anyways, I forget the specific dates, but you can go look this up. Once again, Libertarian Institute. But anyways, the court case is going on, and then Merrick Garland travels all the way to DC one day, comes right back. And this is in the course of 2 days. And according to the guest logs, you can tell he was meeting with Merrick Garland was in there to meet with Hillary Clinton. Now, why? I don't know. We can only speculate, but it's weird that in the midst of him, dealing with McVeigh, and in the big part of Merrick Garland's part too, is a lot of people really make a point about how he really was I don't know if I'd almost say aggressive, but almost aggressive degree. He was trying to get away from the John Doe 2 shit. Very much getting away from that stuff. But anyways, he met with her and came right back, which is weird because it's like, why couldn't we just talk over the phone? He was in Oklahoma, went all the way to DC. Weird. I think there's something going on there. And this was when he's in the midst of this huge case, the biggest thing going on in the nation at the time. Why couldn't he just get a phone call over a secure line? I don't know. Then you also have Eric Holder, who was I think he had, I don't have really any specific thing that I can give you aside from he was key in, in some aspects of the cover up of Jesse Trenadu's death, or not Jesse, Kenneth Trenadu, who is another individual who, was suicided as well. That's a whole other story. I actually just wrote an article on that recently. It's actually going to be published in Galison magazine here soon. So if you guys want to go buy that, it should be coming out in the next issue. So go look up Galison magazine online. Get you the newest one. But anyways, yes, Kenneth Trenadu, he was key in that and dealing with the cover up there. Then Robert Mueller, I believe, was the head of the FBI during a period of time, not during the Oklahoma City period, but during later when with the Jesse Trenadu stuff, where he was fighting for justice with his brother Kenneth, because he's been fighting that stuff for ever. He still is, which that's a whole other story. At least just people go look into that. But yes, that's part of why it still matters. A lot of these people are still in power, and if you understand the nature of the deep state. These aren't elected officials. So a lot of times these people stay here forever and they just climb up the ladder. And so this happened in 95. It's not that long ago. And I think if you compare this to other crazy events, impactful events that we later find out there's more to, I'm trying to think of an example of, I don't know, JFK, where we've kind of gotten more drops over the years. What's another one? I can't think of any of them right now. The Lusitania, all these different things have happened over time that we have this one official narrative, and then come to find out decades later, it's an insanely different, very sinister thing that actually happened. Northwood's a good example, or MK Ultra, or Mockingbird. I was having a brain fart, but stuff like that. There are also major events that have happened as well that fit this bill, but we normally don't find out about them until decades later. And I feel like my gut feeling is this one's ahead of schedule, and that's a big deal. It seems to be we're in this weird inflection point where people are getting interested, people are getting sucked into this, and I think we are at this point where we may be able to push the bill to get this one quicker. And if we can keep that trend going as time goes on, I think it will continue with the nature of, technology of how it is now and being able to spread messages. I think it's going to be unstoppable. And I just think the sooner we can get stuff like this to get exposed to the public, the better, as opposed to waiting 50 years when no one gives a shit. Aside from people like me, they're like, MK Ultra's real. And people are like, you just sound crazy. But MK Ultra is real. If you go look at this, there's stuff that was like, but like if you talk to a norm, I feel like your average person probably thinks MK Ultra is just nonsense and didn't happen. It's just crazy stuff kook people say. Like they probably don't even realize this stuff that's been like, there's been stuff that's been declassified. They
may not even be familiar with the term, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's the point. Well, that's the effect of what happens when you like get the truth like confirmed like 50, 60 years later. Then people are like, oh, okay, whatever. So I think we're ahead of time on that one. I also think I think the Oklahoma City bombing is like good Rosetta Stone for understanding a lot of stuff going on. Like once you start to understand the Oklahoma City bombing, like you'll be like, oh shit. Like it's just like it's like the glasses from that like one movie. Was it like the They Live or whatever?
They Live, yeah.
I think it's They Live. Yeah, it's like that. It really, once you start picking up on these things, what the feds do, some of the stuff, you're like, oh shit. Like you start picking up these patterns. And I also think it's kind of almost like an art of the deal thing. Like I know a lot of people bring up like, well, we got January 6th going on today. We got this other thing. We got that. Like, why don't we focus on that? I'm like, for one, we can do both. And two, if I can get you sucked into the Oklahoma City bombing and, start kind of like questioning that narrative, then it's super easy for me to be like, hey, this Ray Epps guy, this dude look like a Fed to you? They're like, yeah, dude looks like a motherfucker. But if it's just some dude who hasn't done that, hasn't gone acclimated to that stuff, and just like your normie or whoever, and like, I don't know, maybe there's some other explanation for why he's being so weird. I think it's like almost like
or even the Whitmer.
Yes, deal. The Whitmer one too. And it's like also a lot of this stuff too is like once you like I mentioned before, start tugging on threads, you start realizing, oh, here's this here's this operation, here's that operation. And you're like, oh shit, that's the same operation going over here, and that ties into that. Like PatCon is a big part of this, which I mean we don't really have enough time to really go into it, but PatCon ties a lot of this stuff together. It just it's really hard to express, but I just really feel like we are at a inflection point, an important time for this, and I really do think it does matter. I mean, we do have and I think it also like I think it's like I don't know if you're how much of a nerd you are, but you know the Green Lanterns, right?
Yeah.
You know the Blue Lanterns. Have you heard of the Blue Lanterns?
Nope.
They're like their whole thing is like hope because it's like different, that emotional spectrum and like.
Oh yeah, the rings have different. There's different colors.
Green's middle, like it's almost like it's willpower in the center, and then it's like a color spectrum, but it's like emotions, and green's in the middle. It's just will. But there is the blue ones, which is hope. Like their powers are weird. If anything, they just boost the other one's powers. And I feel like that's what it's like. If we have people attacking things like pushing the January 6th, the Gretchen Whitmers, the current day stuff, and you also have people pushing stuff like something from 95, like Oklahoma City bombing. Like, I think that's important because I think a lot of times people may get the idea, especially in your traditional duopoly. I hate that word because it's just gay. But like your normal party politic people, they will see stuff like the Whitmer thing, and be like, yep, they're coming after, or January 6th or whatever, and be like, oh, yep, the FBI is coming after conservatives or whatever. And you're like, I mean, I guess, and you're like, and they act like, oh, yep, this is like a new phenomenon. They haven't been like this. And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Look at this thing from 95. I mean, yes, I guess technically we're still in a sense attacking the conservatives. So I guess in a certain sense will reconfirm their beliefs, but at least like now they're going to be like, oh shit, this has been going on for a while now. And you're like, yeah, the FBI's been fucked forever, dude.
Yeah, it establishes a pattern of behavior.
Yes. Yes. And which I think is important, because if you are just looking at the new shit, you're like, oh, what is going on here? And you're like, well, what do you mean? Like, you have an hour? But yeah, I really think it is really important right now. It's kind of part of why I've been really pushing it so hard. I mean, also I'm just like spurging like a motherfucker on it right now too. So like to some extent, like people always ask me stuff like, well, why do you cover this or why do you do that, or well, not always, but I've had people ask, and I'm like, I don't know, because I wanna. It really is
Because it's
just a
interesting.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting, and that's kind of what like the podcast is for me, an outlet for like, I don't know, I want to talk about democracy, the God that failed today, so that's what I'm gonna do, and or I want to talk about, I don't know, the Vegas shooting or whatever, and you know what? Here's this one person who'll talk to me about it who knows a lot about it. I guess I'm gonna learn some shit. And I do get on these rabbit holes where I'm really interested in this one thing, and this is for me. This has been the thing I've been really interested in right now, and I think it's been resonating with other people as well, which I guess maybe probably reinforces my spurg. But it also just kind of like is like, okay, shit, I think I'm onto something here. I think like people actually interested too, and I'm like, oh shit, let's see if I can get like a network effect of like other people being like, okay, cool, like, oh, other people are bringing in information. Oh, this person linked me up with this guest. Like, like I mentioned earlier, the Steve Vassar guy. That dude, which once it was a close friend of Yeekey, was a John Doe 2 eyewitness and a first responder. That dude, I don't know if I would have been able to pull this off. Would have gone that interview, aside from like me relentlessly pushing it. It's just and I've also had other people reach out to me, which I'm not going to name names, that kind of related to ethereally or roughly to some of this stuff. And so it's just like, I mean, none of this would have happened if I didn't push it. So I think it's good bringing in that network effect and see what you can accomplish. And I think it just like kind of spider webs from there. And I'm looking forward to continue to keep going. I already have I guess it's not technically confirmed. I'm supposed to be on the Tinfoil Hat here soon again with Sam Tripoli,
Oh,
or
cool.
not again, but should be on that soon. So I don't know, whatever. I mean, whoever will hear me out or talk about it, or if I get on any big pot, and I'm not even saying I'm the best at talking about it. It's just whatever people want to have me on and talk about it, I'll do it. I'd actually, if anything, I do the opposite. I think people should try to get Richard Booth on their show. That's what I think people should do. But if that's not what people do, then whatever. I'm here and I'll talk about it. So and I'll do my best. Yeah, but I'm kind of rambling on at this point. But yeah.
Well, man, I've really enjoyed having this conversation, and I hope the people that are listening to this later, I hope you learned something. Jose, do you want to plug stuff?
Yeah, sure. I have my show No Way Jose on YouTube, all the major odd pockets Aussie as well. You follow me on Twitter at Tower Gang Jose. Like I mentioned, I do have that. I did write that article that will be dropping in Galison magazine here soon. So I suggest you go check that out. It was the Journal of Deep Politics and History is what it is. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. If you want to give me on patreon.com, No Way Jose 2020. Yeah, and we kind of only slightly scratched the surface here. I'll be honest, I was off my game a little bit. If you ever want me back, we can dig in more on other parts of this. But there's a lot, like especially when you start into like CIA connections, other how other different federal agencies are involved. The infiltration of McVeigh and his buddies. It gets weird. There's a lot to this case, and I highly suggest people digging into it.
How many episodes and hours have you spent on this specific topic?
Well, I've done of the main series. I have, because if it like the way it is, if you go to my YouTube and go to my playlist, I have an OKC playlist. Now, technically, that isn't all my OKC content. I've done stuff where I've talked about before. I don't do it anytime I talk about putting there, but I have 9 episodes of the What Really Happened to Oklahoma City bombing series and 1 bonus episode of it, which is with Ken Silva. And then I have 2 other episodes within that series, which I guess I would almost see it as like other bonus episodes or other additional content if I was to make this like a DVD or something. And then I have an episode where I dug into the sources with Terrance Yeakey. I read that letter like we did here. Kind of talked about a little bit more. Brought up some of the others. I kind of brought up all the different sources. They're not all of them, but a lot of the different sources that we kind of breezed over here, or I kind of stammered over a little bit. And then also the interview with Steve Vassar's in that playlist as well. because I'm trying to make that playlist over time to kind of be like a great place. Like if I find, like, say I either interview other individuals who had knowledge of what's going on, like bring new stuff to the case, I'll put it in there in that playlist. So if anyone wants to find that stuff, you go there. I mean, obviously you can go to like the podcatchers and just type in the Google search, but you may have an easier time just going to the playlist on YouTube and whatever. You can watch it on whatever platform you want after that. But yeah, I've done of just the series, I've done like 15 hours ish. And then I guess if you add the other stuff, it's a lot.
Yeah, we went an hour and a half and we barely scratched the surface. So
yes,
it's interesting how deep that rabbit hole goes for sure.
Yeah, it's not, and it goes even further than what I cover in there. Like it goes like beyond that. It's weird. Which I mean, we don't have time to go into all that, but we could some other time.
Well, hey man, I really enjoyed it. Guys, if you're not following me on Twitter, my name is Liberty Denton with a 0 for the O. Like and follow and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.